So whenever I've produced videos on golf, I've noticed that they're not that popular. But that's not going to stop me from producing another one, because golf was one of the first markets that I ever traded on Betfair, and it makes a significant contribution to my P&L over the course of the year. And when you get underneath the top level of golf, there are lots of things that sort of make sense in terms of how you would expect to trade it. And it's a sport that I enjoy trading. So if you want to learn a little bit more about how you would trade on golf and the sort of things that you're looking for, just watch the rest of this video. If you're interested in learning more about what I do, how and why, then visit the Academy, where you can get much more structured content. But you should also visit our website, where you can speak to like-minded people, download additional content and files, and of course you can also get hold of a free trial of the cutting-edge software that will completely transform your betting and trading. So one of the things that should interest you and guide you in terms of how you would trade golf is the field size. When you look at these major championships, they will be 150 plus players. US Masters is a little bit less. But fundamentally speaking, there are a lot of players that could potentially win this tournament. So you look at that and you think, well, how on earth could I possibly find a winner within there? But of course, finding a loser is a lot easier. If you've got 150 plus players, there's only going to be one winner. There's going to be 150 plus losers. So that naturally sort of leads you to lean on a lay to back strategy, because fundamentally speaking, if you have players that are miss at the odd stroke, or miss the odd putt, I should say, or drop a couple of strokes here or there, then all of a sudden their price will start to drift out, and that presents an opportunity for you. So I always tend to work on the lay side, and I will do a lay to back in some capacity, laying to a liability and trading out when that particular situation that I'm trading has transpired. And I just repeat that process continuously. And of course, you've got 4 days on which to do all of that trading. That allows you to accumulate a larger total over the course of a tournament. So the key thing about the Open Championship is that it is played on a links course, and a links course will be near the coast. It will probably be built on sand dunes or very close to them. And the style of play that you have on a links course is very, very different from that you would have with a parkland course. So it does favour players that are sort of familiar with playing on links, but also it does favour, or it sort of, I was going to say favours, but it doesn't. It levels out the playing field a bit more, because when you're on a parkland course and you have a younger player, they can tend to drive the ball just so much further than those older players. However, when you play on a links course, driving the ball a long distance isn't as important as driving it accurately. You've got narrower fairways, and the rough is an absolute nightmare. It's not like the rough at the US Masters, where it practically looks like the fairway at the Open. The rough at the Open is going to be really, really rough, and you're going to lose a shot if you get up or you end up in the long stuff there, so it's not ideal. But the style of play is completely different on a links course. Because you're near a coast, you tend to get sea breezes. If you get a little bit of wind as well, that tends to make people drive off the tee a little bit lower, and therefore the distance is shorter. But also just the nature of the course makes it a much sort of trickier proposition. It's all about your experience and getting out of difficulties that comes to the fore, and accuracy driving off of the tee, rather than just the power and distance that you would typically get. So therefore, it sort of has a tendency to favour more experienced players over the younger players. But it's a defining characteristic of this particular championship. And it also serves to muddle things up a little bit as well. It levels the playing field and makes things much more uncertain, which is great from a trading perspective. But also, if you get some really bad weather, then that just completely turns it into a lottery. So often you're sort of wishing for a bit of bad weather, because that can really scramble things up dramatically, and people that were clearly in the lead could end up faltering dramatically. And, that's just one of the characteristics that you get when you're playing on a links course. So because of this huge variability that you see on a links course, one of the areas that you could look at, and something that I've done successfully over a large number of years, is to look at capturing some of those bigger priced winners. In the time that I have been trading the Open Golf, the average price of the winner is 172. It's absolutely massive. And if we look at last year, Brian Harman traded at a high of about 450, but he went on to win. But big prices at the Open Golf aren't unusual. We have had a couple of instances where we have had shorter prices, but you have to go back to Jordan Spieth in 2017, where he went off at a shorter price. And by shorter, I mean he went off as the favourite at 16.5, just about got there. But if we go way back, Tiger Woods has actually distorted that average of 172 somewhat, because he had a few years where he went off at incredibly short odds to win the championship. So overall, it does throw up some of these big price winners. And if you want to capture some of that value, the way I suggest you do that is that you Dutch the back of the field. You use a fixed stake, you cover a whole range of individual players, but that's a pretty good strategy to take advantage of all of those big odds that you see coming in at the Open Golf. So when we look at the leaders of this particular tournament, there are some interesting stats that come out of this, because the leader after the first day only goes on to win the tournament about 10% of the time. So it's very easy to have a good round, but very difficult to have 4 good rounds. So it's very possible that somebody may hit the top of the leaderboard, but they probably won't stay there. If we look at the person that leads after the second round, they go on to win the tournament about 26% of the time. So you'd expect them to be priced around 4s or 5s at that particular moment. And if we look at the person that leads on the third round, then they will go on to win the tournament about sort of 46% of the time. It's almost a sort of a coin toss. Now, some of this will be dependent upon the number of strokes that they have in the lead, because nobody's ever won the tournament being 6 strokes down on that last day. They've never been able to make that gain to the leader on the last day. So there's a little bit of judgment required here. But fundamentally speaking, that you will see a change of leader fairly consistently, especially when we look at different types of courses. If we actually look at the course and slope rating at each of these individual courses, you can see which courses tend to play harder than others. What I've done is I've ranked these from 1 being the hardest to 10 being the easiest. So the harder the course is, the harder it will be to hold on to a lead. You can play as much percentage golf as you like, but it's still very likely that you'll make a mistake at some point and you will get punished on a links course. So one thing that will have a massive impact on the outcome of a tournament played on a links course is the weather. I always research that particular part of the world, where the prevailing winds are, which coast it's on, and all of these sort of things, to try and get a handle on how the weather could influence the outcome. But also the front 9 will play differently from the back 9, depending upon whether they're playing in or against the breeze, or however, all of those things are going to come into play. And if we get a bit of mixed up weather, then that could have a significant impact on the outcome of the tournament and even individual games within that tournament. On those first 2 days, the pairings are set up in a certain way. So players that go out early in the morning could have very different conditions from players that are out in the evening. And on the last 2 days, that gets evened out a bit because the pairings will be a little bit closer together. But nonetheless, that will have a significant impact on the outcome of the tournament. The weather is something that you should be looking at all of the time, getting an understanding of how that affects how the holes are playing. But also, especially when we're on the first 2 days, the weather conditions will vary dramatically from the first person that tees off to the last person that tees off. And that will have a significant impact, which you can trade. So I always find golf trading very appealing, because there are so many different factors that allow you to anticipate or figure out what is likely to happen. And as I said at the beginning of the video, there can only be one winner and all of the other players will lose. So you've got a pretty good chance of getting it right anyway. But as a consequence, I tend to go for a laid back, and I tend to do that given how the course is playing, and how the weather is influencing that play, what times the players teed off, and all of that sort of thing as well. That gives me a clue as to where would be the best time for that, and when players are going through a harder part of the course, or whether they're facing more challenging conditions. It's very easy to drop a shot in golf, and that will move you down the leaderboard, and your odds will change as a consequence. If you don't want to trade in play, then you can always try and Dutch the back of the book, because this will capture some of those much bigger winners. And like I said as well at the beginning of the video, there have been absolutely massive winners at this particular championship, and that is because links golf is hard. It's very easy to drop a shot, and if the weather isn't great, it sort of completely scrambles the whole thing up dramatically, and it becomes a bit of a lottery. But rather than being a negative, that is one of the appealing things about golf. If you get yourself on the right side of that, you'll almost certainly be able to trade it profitably.